8. Ruben Espinoza and Christian Carranza. In a lawsuit filed against the city of Santa Fe, Texas in May of 2024, a woman named Taylor Rogers accused Sergeant Ruben Espinoza and Officer Christian Carranza of slamming her to the ground and forcing her face into a pile of fire ants during a traffic stop in August of 2021. According to police, Rogers tried to flee after being pulled over for making an illegal U-turn in a school zone. Body cam footage showed an officer holding the woman face down on the ground as she shouted that there were ants on her face and screamed in agony. The lawsuit claims that the police refused to help remove the ants from her face when she was handcuffed and unable to swat the insects away on her own. Photos that were purportedly taken after the incident show Rogers' head, face, neck, and shoulders covered in what looked like hundreds of bites. Espinoza denied shoving Rogers' face into a fire ant nest, claiming that the body cam video shows no sign of the insects being present during Rogers' arrest. Furthermore, Espinoza accused Rogers' attorney of conveniently omitting portions of the body cam footage. This included a clip of the officers helping Rogers off the ground. He maintains that the police treated Rogers with dignity and respect. Espinoza also stands by allegations that Rogers knowingly ignored his orders and attempted to flee. Rogers pleaded guilty to charges relating to the incident despite claiming that she only tried to flee because Espinoza banged on her car and pointed a gun at her. The civil case is ongoing. 7. Eric Hugley. While responding to a disorderly conduct complaint in September 2021, Indianapolis police handcuffed 38-year-old Jermaine Vaughn for allegedly refusing to quiet down. One of the 3 officers at the scene, Matthew Shores, told Vaughn to lean back. Vaughn said he couldn't because the officer was holding his belt, at which point Shores pushed him onto the pavement. Officer Eric Hugley proceeded to stomp on Vaughn's face, causing his mouth to bleed. Hugley's actions were discovered a few weeks later during a routine screening of body cam footage for use of excessive force. In the footage, Hugley could be heard saying that he meant to put his foot on Vaughn's shoulder and that he hit the man's face by accident. Officer Shores commented that the incident looked very bad and he wasn't wrong. Charges against Vaughn for disorderly conduct and resisting law enforcement were later dropped. All 3 officers who responded to the scene were placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of an internal investigation. More than a year after the incident, federal authorities charged Hugley with violating Vaughn's civil rights. According to the Department of Justice, Vaughn was already effectively restrained and posed no threats to the police or public when Hugley kicked him in the face. Hugley admitted to the excessive use of force, but claimed it was a completely out of character, one-time lapse in judgment. He pleaded guilty to the charge and was sentenced to a year in federal prison and resigned from the police department shortly thereafter. Hugley also pleaded guilty to a state-level battery charge and received a 180-day jail sentence to run concurrent with his federal term. 6. Zack King and Levi White. In August of 2022, a 27-year-old Arkansas man named Randall Worcester was arrested for allegedly threatening a convenience store employee in Crawford County. He was taken into custody by deputies Zack King and Levi White and Mulberry police officer Tell Riddle, who were later accused of using excessive force against the young man. A 34-second video captured by an onlooker showed one of the officers slamming Worcester's face into the pavement and punching him in the head multiple times, while another officer kneed him in the side and back. Worcester could be seen trying to shield himself from the beatdown, and the video abruptly ended after one of the cops noticed that someone was filming and told them to stop. The police claimed that before the bystander started recording, Worcester body slammed one deputy. They also claimed he bit and spat on members of law enforcement as they struggled to subdue him. He was charged with a litany of crimes including battery, assault, resisting arrest, criminal trespass, criminal mischief, and terroristic threatening. Shortly after the disturbing footage emerged, deputies King and White were suspended from their jobs, and Officer Riddle was also put on leave from his position with the Mulberry Police Department, while the Arkansas State Police investigated the incident. King and White were subsequently charged with excessive force and civil rights violations. In the meantime, Worcester bonded out of jail and filed a federal lawsuit against the deputies. In early 2024, King pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge. White pleaded guilty to one felony count of deprivation of rights under color of law. According to the most recent updates on the case, they're awaiting sentencing, and the civil suit is ongoing. 5. A lesson lost in translation. Kathy Austrian and her teenage son J.A. were having a typical parent-child argument over screen time in May of 2021 when J.A. left their Burlington, Vermont home to cool off. When he returned a short while later with some stolen vape pens from a nearby convenience store, Austrian saw it as a good opportunity to teach her son a lesson about accountability for one's actions. She called the police, who had helped peacefully resolve behavioral issues involving the special needs teenager in the past. J.A. handed all except one of the stolen vape pens to responding officers, who proceeded to restrain the young man while wresting the remaining one out of his hand. The police then handcuffed J.A., who panicked and began thrashing and screaming. During the ensuing struggle, he could be heard expressing a fear that the officers were going to do the same thing to him that Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd. Concerned for her son's well-being, Austrian requested paramedics, who came to the scene and sedated J.A. with a ketamine injection. The teen fell unconscious and was treated at a nearby hospital. In early 2024, Austrian filed a lawsuit accusing the responding officers of needlessly escalating the situation. She claimed that she'd warned the cops about J.A.'s intellectual disabilities and how confining him would elicit a much worse reaction than giving him space. The lawsuit claims that despite being informed on J.A.'s condition and how to best approach the delicate situation, emergency responders diagnosed him with excited delirium. Characterized by symptoms and behaviors like superhuman strength, pain tolerance, agitation, and police non-compliance, excited delirium has historically been applied to a disproportionate number of African Americans, particularly men. An officer mentioned it during the fatal arrest of George Floyd. The diagnosis was applied in at least 2 other headlining cases of black men dying in police custody that year, including Elijah McCain of Aurora, Colorado, and Daniel Prude of Rochester, New York. Many experts do not consider excited delirium to be a valid diagnosis, and one study even called it scientifically meaningless, yet it remains in use by emergency responders across the US. Austrian claims that the speed and aggression of both the police and the EMT's response to J.A. reflects an implicit racial bias that contributed toward her son's alleged mistreatment. Since the incident, the state of Vermont has eliminated the term excited delirium from its protocol. The Burlington Police Department has amended its use of force policy to be more sensitive toward people with a diminished capacity or who may display unusual behavior due to intoxication or mental illness. Despite these changes, Austrian chose to move forward with the lawsuit because she wants the city to acknowledge that J.A. was mistreated. She also wants those involved to be held accountable in an effort to prevent any other families in Burlington from going through a similarly traumatic experience. 4. The Rankin County Goon Squad. For years, possibly decades, a group of Rankin County, Mississippi deputies calling themselves the Goon Squad bonded over their enjoyment of using excessive force against criminal suspects. They created a culture of misconduct which infiltrated some of the agency's highest ranks. To date, nearly 24 people have claimed to suffer unwarranted violence during searches and arrests. In January of 2023, 6 Goon Squad members, Hunter Elwood, Greg McAlpin, Christian Dedman, Daniel Obdyke, Jeffrey Middleton, and Joshua Hartfield, assaulted and tortured 2 black men, Michael Jenkins and Eddie Parker. They did so while raiding a residence in Braxton without a warrant or probable cause. The handcuffed victims were beaten, tased, doused with cooking grease, milk, and other food items, and subjected to racist name-calling over a 90-minute period. Jenkins was shot in the mouth and left bleeding on the floor with no medical help. Thankfully, he survived. The Goon Squad destroyed evidence of their actions, fabricated false drug evidence, and filed bogus charges against Parker and Jenkins. Following a federal investigation, all 6 officers were charged in both state and federal court for their roles in the horrifying crime and the ensuing cover-up. The defendants pleaded guilty to more than a dozen federal charges, including civil rights conspiracy, deprivation of rights under the color of law, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to commit obstruction. They also pleaded guilty to state charges, including conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice, and were sentenced to concurrent state and federal terms ranging from 10 to 40 years. Sadly, this is just one of several disturbing violent acts that the Goon Squad is accused of committing in recent years. there are multiple ongoing lawsuits against various members and the county authorities, including one case accusing deputies of mercilessly beating a man named Christopher Mack in 2021 while he was detained on suspicion of drug activity. The 45-minute assault took place at the local jail, leaving Mack with broken ribs, 2 black eyes, and other injuries. In another ongoing excessive force lawsuit, a black man named Bobby Adams is accusing a sheriff's deputy of sicking a K9 on him while he was handcuffed and subdued. The lawsuit claims that the dog attacked and bit him at his handler's command, while several deputies stood around and watched. Adams was accused of kicking the dog, causing it to bite him repeatedly, but he denied the allegations. As things currently stand, at least 9 suspected members of the Goon Squad who were not present at the attack on Parker and Jenkins remain on the force. Rankin County Sheriff Brian Bailey condemned the Goon Squad's disturbing crimes and claimed he had no knowledge of these violent incidents, which are thought to date back as far as 2004. 3. Rand and Vera Bream. In late November of 2022, police in Ogden, Utah received an anonymous complaint about suspected squatters at a local residence. Officers paid a visit to the home, where they spoke with 78-year-old Rand Bream and his 74-year-old wife, Vera. Rand explained that he owned the home and that a no occupancy sign on his door was in reference to the couple's contaminated basement. The Breams are now claiming in a civil lawsuit that the police tackled Rand in an unprovoked fashion after asking him for his driver's license, leaving the senior citizen with bruises, lacerations, and a torn rotator cuff. Describing law enforcement's actions as illegal, unconstitutional, and otherwise improper, the couple's attorney Bob Sykes is accusing officers of using grossly excessive force on his client, who was not resisting or being uncooperative. The lawsuit was filed in 2023 after an internal investigation cleared both officers involved of any wrongdoing. In response to a request for comment from Fox 13 News, an Ogden police spokesperson declined to go into detail about the incident, but stated that the agency is confident that the officer's use of force will be deemed justified based on body cam footage. 2. The arrest of Christopher J.J. Cunningham Jr. In May of 2024, emergency personnel responded to the scene of an ATV accident in Chattanooga, Georgia, where 21-year-old Christopher J.J. Cunningham Jr. was suffering from a head injury. Bystander footage shows Cunningham being wrestled to the ground by deputies, who allegedly tased him and placed him in a chokehold. Cunningham's family is accusing law enforcement of using excessive force, while the authorities claim that the young man became violent and punched a paramedic in the face while they were trying to treat him. He also appeared intoxicated and smelled of alcohol, according to Chattanooga Sheriff Mark Schrader, who admitted that a taser and other methods were used to subdue Cunningham. The incident soon turned into a family affair, with Cunningham's mother, father, and sister all arrested amid the chaos. Speaking during a press conference shortly after the incident, JJ's mother, Carmen Cunningham, explained that her son was confused and acting erratically due to his head injury. She said she thought emergency responders would sedate him rather than resorting to physical force. According to the most recent updates on the case, JJ remains hospitalized with severe injuries. Meanwhile, the Cunninghams have retained an attorney and are calling on the authorities to drop the charges they face in connection with the incident. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Buck Aldridge. After spending 16 years in a Florida prison for an armed robbery he didn't commit, Leonard Cure was exonerated and released in 2020. Sadly, he only got to experience a few years of freedom before he was fatally shot by a deputy during a traffic stop in Camden County, Georgia in October of 2023. Leonard, who was 53 years old at the time, was pulled over for speeding and driving erratically along Interstate 95 near the Florida-Georgia line. Rather than follow the customary protocol of approaching Cure at the driver's side window and asking for his license, insurance, and registration, Deputy Buck Aldridge immediately ordered him to exit his vehicle. Dashcam footage would later show that Cure initially cooperated with Aldridge's commands. But he began to panic when the deputy told him he was under arrest for reckless driving and commented on how he should get a ticket instead, while failing to obey his instructions to put his hands behind his back. Aldridge tased Cure, then fatally shot him during a physical struggle. Some might argue that Cure could have prevented his own death if he'd followed Aldridge's instructions. But Aldridge took an unusually aggressive approach to the situation, and it wasn't the first time he was accused of losing his temper on the job. 4 years earlier, in 2018, he was fired from the Kingsland, Georgia Police Department after racking up 3 excessive complaints. During the final incident that cost Aldridge's job, he allegedly picked a woman up and threw her on the ground while attempting to detain her during a traffic stop. Following Cure's death, Aldridge was fired for violating Camden County's use of force policy. He's not being criminally charged, but is being sued in civil court by Cure's surviving family members.
8. Alicia Mar Garvin. In October 2020, a 29-year-old Ohio woman named Alicia Mar Garvin was accused of pulling the fire alarms, running through the hallways naked, and otherwise wreaking havoc at a hotel in Sweetwater, Tennessee. But her reasons for doing so are unclear. Officer Brandon Kanzler told local news outlet Advocate and Democrat that he was called to the Oyo Motel, where the fire alarms were ringing when he arrived. He said that the front desk clerk told him that Garvin was knocking on guests' doors and asking strangers if they wanted to be intimate with her. The employee also claimed that they repeatedly told Garvin to leave, but that she refused. According to Officer Kanzler, the young woman was coming out of the lobby when he arrived at the hotel. He didn't specify whether or not she'd put her clothes back on, but said that she was yelling nonsensically. And when he asked her why she pulled the fire alarms, Garvin allegedly claimed that she thought she was about to be attacked. She also thought she was at a gas station rather than a hotel. In his report, Officer Kanzler noted that Garvin's pupils seemed dilated and that she was acting paranoid. It also didn't help that she was unable to stand still. In the end, Garvin was charged with public intoxication, trespassing, and filing a false report. But unfortunately, the outcome of the case is unclear. 7. Carly Russell. In a strange case that's only gotten more bizarre as more details come to light, a 25-year-old nursing student named Carly Russell is being accused of staging a kidnapping hoax. It all began in mid-July of 2023, when the young woman called 911 and claimed that she found a toddler stranded along an Alabama interstate. She then called a family member and vanished into thin air for the next 2 days. But 48 hours later, Russell reappeared at her parents' door. She allegedly told investigators that a mystery man had abducted her. Russell also claimed that she was kept in a trailer of a truck with a man and a woman, and that her abductors fed her cheese crackers and took photos of her. But detectives failed to find any evidence of a toddler going missing along the highway, despite numerous cars passing through the area at the time Russell's initial 911 call was placed. Furthermore, a search of the young woman's devices turned up Google searches from before the alleged kidnapping for terms like Amber Alerts and how to take money from a register without getting caught. In the end, Russell admitted that the kidnapping was a hoax and apologized to the community. She now faces 2 misdemeanor charges for falsely reporting, which can each carry a punishment of up to a year in prison. Her ex-boyfriend, Tomar Latrell Simmons, came forward several months after the ordeal and told news outlets that he doesn't know why Russell allegedly faked her disappearance. He said that the couple had a little argument before the incident, but nothing that someone would make themselves disappear over. Hopefully in the coming months, more details will come to light as the case unfolds. 6. Margaret Frances Elizabeth Sweeney. In August 2023, a 37-year-old North Carolina woman named Margaret Frances Maggie Elizabeth Sweeney was accused of faking her own murder. According to law enforcement, the bizarre case began to unfold when Sweeney anonymously contacted a friend and a social services employee and falsely claimed that she'd been bludgeoned to death with a tire iron. She was then reported as missing to the police. But Sweeney appeared to be alive and well when the authorities located her in a nearby town the next day, after officers spent an estimated 75 hours searching for her and investigating the case. In a Facebook post, the Franklin Police Department condemned the woman for allegedly distracting officers from other matters that could have used their attention. Franklin Police Chief Devin Holland told NBC News that Sweeney was found at a park and that she claimed she didn't have a consistent place to live at the time of the strange incident. In addition to squandering valuable police resources, Holland said that the woman caused her friends, family, and the community to fear for her safety. Sweeney was charged with causing a false report to a police station, falsely reporting death or serious injury by telephonic communication, and obstructing law enforcement officers. She was released on her own recognizance after promising to return to court at a later date. So currently, the case is ongoing, and her reasons for allegedly faking her murder are unclear. 5. Zachariah Peterson. Around 2,200 employees at an automotive assembly plant in Clay Como, Michigan, were faced with a terrifying situation in July 2023 when they were forced to evacuate their workplace on a moment's notice due to a bomb threat. According to Clay County investigators, 19-year-old Zachariah Peterson made the call, claiming that he was armed with an AK-47 and a handgun. He also said that he had a pound of C4 explosives strapped to his chest. Numerous law enforcement agencies responded to a call at the 6 million square foot plant. They spent the next 6 hours thoroughly searching the facility before determining that the threat was a hoax. Clay County Sheriff Will Aiken later told news reporters that the agency had reason to believe that the threat wasn't real, but that they had to treat it like it was, just in case. After all, it's better to be safe than sorry. Thankfully, though, nobody was injured during the ordeal. Prosecutors claim that Peterson called in the threat during the early evening for the specific purpose of prompting an evacuation, and he did this so that an acquaintance of his wouldn't have to go to work that day. For all intents and purposes, it worked. After being evacuated, the employees were sent home and the night shift was canceled. But the favor for a friend is coming at a high price for Peterson, who was charged with 1 felony count of making a terrorist threat. If convicted, he could face up to 7 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000. 4. Audrey Sailor. During the early morning hours one Saturday in March 2004, a 20-year-old college student named Audrey Sailor vanished in Madison, Wisconsin. Fearing the worst, her family, friends, and the community came together and immediately began searching the area in hopes of finding her safe. 4 days later, Sailor was found in a marshy area roughly 2 miles from her university's campus. The young woman was physically unharmed, but seemed emotionally shaken. She told police that she'd been abducted at knife point by a stranger, who she described as a young white man that stood about 6 feet tall and dressed in all black. Sailor also claimed that her captor didn't hurt her, but that he held her against her will. A doctor who treated her after she was found noticed that she was doing remarkably well considering the circumstances, and that may have been because Sailor wasn't really abducted. After failing to find a suspect matching the description she gave, police began looking at Sailor herself as a person of interest. They soon discovered surveillance footage of her buying a knife, duct tape, rope, and other items that were found scattered alongside her in the marsh where she was rescued. A search of Sailor's Google history showed that she'd recently researched maps of local wooded areas and extended weather forecasts. And she was captured on video leaving her apartment building alone on the morning she vanished. Authorities became even more suspicious of Sailor when a civilian came forward and said that he'd seen her in the marsh several days before she was found, and that she seemed completely fine. Sailor was charged with 2 misdemeanor counts of obstructing justice. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. She was also ordered to pay local law enforcement $250 per month during her probationary period. This was to compensate the police for the tens of thousands of dollars in resources that they squandered on the investigation and manhunt. Until then, Sailor was a model citizen, a star student, and a well-liked member of her community. She blamed her depression for her irrational behavior and received a surprising amount of forgiveness from locals, who who seemed willing to overlook the hoax due to her squeaky clean history and her mental health struggles. 3. Jennifer Wilbanks. A Georgia woman named Jennifer Wilbanks became a real-life runaway bride in April 2005 when she disappeared 3 days before she was due to marry her fiancé, John Mason. The couple planned to exchange their vows in front of 600 guests and 28 bridal party members in a ceremony outside Atlanta. But their plans were put on hold when Wilbanks failed to return home from a jog, sparking a nationwide search and equally widespread media coverage. 3 days later, Wilbanks called Mason from a payphone in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and claimed that a Hispanic man and a white woman had kidnapped and assaulted her. She said that her captors had just released her, and she claimed that she didn't know where she was. By then, the FBI had gotten involved in the case, and it wasn't long before Wilbanks admitted during questioning that she'd lied about being abducted. She'd apparently experienced an extreme case of pre-wedding jitters and wanted to escape the pressures of the upcoming event. Wilbanks confessed that she'd taken a taxi to a Greyhound bus station, where she took a bus to Las Vegas and then to Albuquerque. It's not against the law for someone to get cold feet before their wedding, but authorities felt that Wilbanks had mishandled her anxiety on a criminal level. She was arrested in connection with the hoax, and she and Mason broke up shortly thereafter. The former couple also sued each other, but they both ended up dropping their cases. Wilbanks pleaded guilty to one felony count of making a false statement and was sentenced to 2 years of probation. She was also ordered to perform community service and undergo mental health treatment, and she was required to pay back nearly $16,000 that local law enforcement had spent searching for her and investigating her case. In 2008, news outlets reported that John Mason had married a woman named Shelley Martin. His father told People magazine that the couple exchanged vows in a quiet ceremony at the Masons' home, making for a much different turnout than the large and extravagant wedding that Mason and Wilbanks had planned for themselves 3 years earlier. Wilbanks also met a new man named Greg Hudson. They eventually got engaged, and this time she didn't panic and run away. The couple tied the knot in 2010 and divorced in 2021 after 11 years of marriage. 2. The Tolt River Dam. Owned and operated by the city of Seattle, the Tolt River Reservoir and dams are located 16 miles north of Carnation, Washington. And as the source of 30% of Seattle's drinking water, it's an important fixture of the area's infrastructure. But there have been some issues recently, with false alarms causing repeated evacuations of Carnation's population. If the Tolt River Dam broke, it would most likely send a huge wave of water crashing through the Snoqualmie Valley, where Carnation is located. In fact, a breach of the dam would have the potential to wipe out the entire city with terrifying speed and force. Residents of Carnation have been conducting practice drills for decades, so that they're prepared in case they ever need to get to higher ground. People are used to doing these practice exercises, but the prospect of a real emergency is a relatively new occurrence. Since 2021, there have been at least 4 false alarms, and it's caused major concern among residents. People aren't only worried that there could be a real emergency, they fear that the city's population will become complacent to the alarms and fail to evacuate properly in the event of an actual disaster. And now there's reason to worry that the public officials in charge of operating the dam are also becoming nonchalant about the matter. After the most recent false alarm in August 2023, the city failed to give an all-clear signal afterward. Deputy Mayor Tim Harris blamed the ongoing malfunctions on the early warning system being outdated, and he called on Seattle to get the problem under control. It should have been fixed years ago, according to Carnation Mayor Jim Rybale, who spoke with local station KIRO7 after the latest incident. Not only are these repeated false alarms inconvenient, they've left residents feeling traumatized. And who can blame them for feeling that way? Anyone would likely be on edge if they had to evacuate their home and city over and over because it might be just minutes or seconds away from being flooded with water. 1. Holly Arcand. Over a 4-month period starting in October 2022, a Green Bay, Wisconsin woman named Holly Arcand allegedly made multiple false 911 calls to a specific residence. According to a criminal complaint, Arcand gave a fake name during the first phony call she made. And throughout most of the bogus reports, she allegedly claimed that a man and a woman were fighting. She also complained about drug and weapon-related crimes. Authorities are accusing Arcand of making at least 17 false emergency calls. Investigators narrowed in on her as their prime suspect after it became apparent that there was a pattern of fake reports. The address that Arcand called police to apparently belongs to her ex-boyfriend and his current partner. So naturally, police believe that the couple were targeted. False 911 calls are more than mere inconveniences to dispatchers and law enforcement. They drain resources that are needed for real situations, and could even distract police to the point of putting someone who's having a legitimate emergency in serious danger. After all, cops and emergency responders can only be in so many places at once. Arcand faces 3 felony charges of false reporting an emergency, and 17 misdemeanor counts of false emergency 911 calls. If convicted of the felonies, she could face up to 10 years in prison and a fine of up to $10,000 for each count. Every misdemeanor count could carry a sentence of 30 days in jail and a fine of up to $500.
Thanks for watching. Would you rather get tackled by a police officer and arrested, or chased down 5 blocks by a police dog? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe. See you soon. Bye.